Hey, hello everybody, and God bless. Hope everyone's doing well. I've had a little bit of time on my hands. I've been home with COVID. It's going very well. I've had fever, but yeah, I'm just taking over the counter medications and drinking lots of fluids, and everything's going well. So, any prayers would be greatly appreciated, but I think the Lord's dragging me out of it right now, and hopefully we'll be good to go and no further problems. What I'm going to talk about, obviously being sick, I've had time to watch some TV. So the Travel Channel recently has come out with a lot of neat series, and I need some help from you guys on this. I can't seem to find them on like Apple TV, or not Apple TV, but iTunes, where you can go and download a video series of this TV series or what have you. If anyone can tell me where I can find their videos, where I can save them, let me know, so I can keep them, because they have a lot of good stuff. You might say, yeah, it's big Hollywood, they control it all, those are all actors, whatever. I don't think so. Maybe, but I don't think so. There's quite a few. I think whoever's in charge of this is seeking answers, because it has nothing to do with really traveling around and taking in the sights of Greece or something. They do a lot of paranormal things, and they've shed a lot of light on some stuff, and I've learned a lot just listening to them. So if you, again, this is my quick help. I need help with this. If you can let me know where I can find these programs. Some I think are called When Monsters Attack or Terror in the Woods or something like that. So anyway, if you guys could point me in that direction, that'd be great. Um, anyway, so I was watching this program on the Travel Channel, and it was concerning this cryptid, what they call a cryptid. I don't believe it's a cryptid. The Wendigo. And it was kind of interesting because it's from where I live, where I kind of grew up, in northern Iowa. And it's a specter type creature that is associated with death and winter and cannibalism and everything else. There have been accounts of it being in the flesh type, where it leaves prints, or you could touch it if you had to, or you could, it's physical. And there's also ties to the spirit of this infesting people. One incident was I believe his name was Swift Runner, was an Indian, and he ended up eating his own entire family, as they were up in a cabin, and he said he was possessed by a Wendigo. Other people, a kid at camp, saw one through a window, and then his brother, who was in a separate cabin, went outside and saw it separately, in a pasture or in a opening type thing. And then camp counselors were called, and they came and saw it. So three separate witnesses, different places, different times. So anyway, good validity, of seeing this thing. But as I was watching this, I was really astonished with the witnesses and what they were saying and what they were communicating. And it's almost Sasquatch like in a way that it can communicate dread, evil, very fearful. It was it's described as very lanky, gray, long arms, long legs, and almost to the point of looks like a giant gray alien in a way. Some people have said. Anyway, so I after the episode was over, I just simply said a short prayer, and I said, Lord, can you help me find this creature in the Bible and what it is? And I just kind of started, kind of doing what I normally do: go to Wikipedia, start looking at things that tie to the Bible, things that tie to events or whatever. And he began to peel back the veil on it. And so obviously it's a mythical creature, evil spirit from folklore. Comes from the First Nations Algonquin. Now, the Algonquins consist of many different tribes, and I think there's a list of them here somewhere. Yeah, down here includes, all these sub-tribes. So you have this Algonquin nations, Nova Scotia, Canada, Minnesota, Wisconsin area, and it's depicted as a monstrous, malevolent spirit with some characteristics of a human as a spirit who is possessed a human. Um, it invokes acts of murder, greed, cannibalism, and all these horrible things. So anyway, this is a picture of one, and this is a description of one from this guy here at one of the sub tribes. He's a teacher. He describes it as gaunt to the point of emaciation, desiccated skin pulled over its bones, bones pushing out against the skin, complexion of ash gray, death, eyes in the eye sockets, gaunt skeleton, like coming from the grave. Some people have it with antlers, like deer antlers, and we'll get into that a little bit. And but first, I want to play this video. And in 8 minutes, this lady gives a great description and history of this creature. And for me, it was the first video I looked at, and was quite impressed. So let me play it for you.
It stalks the woods during the coldest and harshest months of the year, plagued with an insatiable hunger. Of immense size and speed, the Wendigo monster of Native American lore has become one of the most notorious flesh eaters of all time. The Wendigo legend teaches us about Native American spiritual beliefs and social values, and has three major symbolic interpretations: the incarnation of winter, the embodiment of hunger, and the personification of selfishness, both spiritual and physical. And then there's cannibalism. I'm Dr. Emily Zarka, and this is Monstrum. The Wendigo has clawed its way into popular culture, appearing in TV shows like Supernatural and Charmed, and Marvel Comics. It's terrorized audiences in movies.
This Indian scout told me a curious story.
Wendigo. It's an old Indian myth from the north.
And video games.
Sam, run. Run!
And even a My Little Pony episode.
What is that thing? They must be Wendigos. Wendigos?
I feel confident saying that this creature's gone mainstream. But almost all of these portrayals fail to capture the complete history or even the original traits of the Wendigo. The Wendigo legend originates with indigenous people who belong to the Algonquian language family. They say it's a giant humanoid cannibal who can move at an incredibly fast speed. The Wendigo is astonishingly tall, with razor-sharp teeth and claws, and lips that are often chewed ragged or gone completely. They have a heart made of ice, and despite their unending hunger for human flesh, they remain emaciated. It shrieks and can run across treetops, and its presence may be preceded by a foul odor or a sudden snowstorm. Almost all Wendigos begin as humans, and once transformed, it has no gender. But how does one become a Wendigo? The most common way is by eating human flesh, but there are others, including dreaming of the Wendigo. It is also believed that you can become a Wendigo without physically transforming. Someone who is in a state of inner turmoil might be at risk of becoming one. Some communities believe it can be caused by spiritual imbalance, or by choosing to prioritize the self over the community. Since the lore of the Algonquian peoples is largely shared through oral tradition, there are several variations of the Wendigo. But the origins of the legend undoubtedly began with the indigenous tribes that lived in the northern woodlands, Atlantic coast, and Great Lakes regions. The Algonquian language family is one of the largest native linguistic groups in North America, and includes these groups, among others. Because of this widespread distribution, the Wendigo has many names, spellings, and pronunciations. There are more than 37 names for it that begin with W. Here we use the spelling that more accurately reflects the Cree and Ojibwe pronunciations, and the one that appears more commonly in indigenous authored texts. Regardless of how it's spelled, there is something that can help explain the Wendigo legend: climate and geography. All of the communities that share the Wendigo myth experience long, harsh winters. With heavy snowfall, freezing temperatures, and a lack of resources, the fear of starvation was a very real thing. This encourages people to stick together, both a practical and necessary means of survival. The Wendigo, on the other hand, thrives in the winter and can travel in blizzards. It hunts for those who are separated from the group or who leave the safety of their homes. The cannibalism is embodied by the Wendigo. Fear is a powerful motivator, and this story spooked people into sharing food resources during the winter and preparing adequate food storages during the rest of the year. So, you wouldn't have to venture out into that blizzard and get eaten by a shrieking Wendigo. The first written mention of the Wendigo occurred in 17th century Jesuit records, which coincides with Europeans entering into the fur trade. The North American fur trade boom in the 18th and 19th centuries meant even more trappers were traveling to present-day Canada. The claws and vicious appetite of the Wendigo, along with the idea that a human could transform into one, reminded the Europeans of a similar legend of their own, the werewolf. Through trade, community, and marriage, a cross-cultural exchange of ideas, including monsters, occurred. A Jesuit priest compared the European monster to the Wendigo's similar canine hunger, saying it makes them so ravenous for human flesh that they pounce upon women, children, and even men like veritable werewolves and devour them voraciously. With associations like that, it makes sense how these two legendary creatures overlap today, and why most Wendigo depictions vary wildly from the original. You might have seen the Wendigo depicted as a stag-human hybrid, a human with antlers, or even with ram horns for ears. There is no evidence of this in all the Algonquian people's versions. The only animal the Wendigo is associated with in some stories is the owl. In fact, Wendigo can translate as owl or cannibal depending on the dialect, which kind of makes sense given that owls do eat flesh and are often seen as omens of death. The image of the antlered Wendigo seen in Hannibal and Pet Cemetery actually originates in the film Wendigo. The director Larry Fessenden merged a story he was told as a child with the scary stories to tell in the dark version of the Wendigo, itself adapted from another author's interpretation. Fessenden admits that he didn't even do research on the Wendigo until after he made the movie. But the image is so foreign and striking, it continues to appear in movies, art, and other pop culture texts. The Wendigo has appeared in another venue, the courtroom. In 1897, a Wendigo killing trial became a landmark case for early Canadian law when an Ojibwe man was found guilty of manslaughter for shooting someone he believed to be a Wendigo. In his culture, killing a Wendigo was acceptable, but his court conviction confirmed that Canadian common law applied to Indigenous communities, even if they had no knowledge of its existence. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, a handful of other Indigenous people were similarly convicted of murder for killing people they deemed Wendigos. Wendigos showed up in another unlikely place, psychiatry. In the 1920s and 30s, Wendigo psychosis, a culture-bound mental illness, was said to be a disorder that drove people to cannibalism or cannibalistic thoughts. But in the 1970s, this diagnosis was brought into question, and no subject with this supposed condition has ever been studied. Today, most scholars reject it completely. Like all monsters, we need to recognize the origins of the creature even as it continues to change and grow in other traditions. Whether it's a Hulk battling a Yeti-esque Wendigo in the woods, or finding the cure to tuberculosis in eating human flesh, greater significance and arguably enjoyment can be found by recognizing the creature's original purpose. The Wendigo is largely popular today because it represents a violation of a human code. Don't kill one another, and certainly don't eat them if you do. But it's more than that. The Wendigo is a warning about what could happen when an individual forgoes the collective for their own survival. The Wendigo is above all a lesson in excess and a manifestation of the anxieties that emerge in the harsh realities of winter, and how to survive it. Hint, don't eat other people. Do you have a favorite monster? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe.
Okay. I thought she did pretty good. A lot of things in there I agree with, especially at the end. How this is a creature of excess. It's giving into the flesh, giving into, indulgence, if you will, versus the collective, as she kind of put it. So she mentioned that the etymology is the owl, which took me obviously right to the Bible. And as you go through here and you look at owls and you start to look at all these different things, it really just blows your mind anyway. But anyway, so depending on the dialect, it can translate owl can either translate owl or cannibal, Wendigo. So that's the screenshot from her video, and this is just another thing to reaffirm that the meaning of Wendigo is probably neither fool nor cannibal monster, but owl. Demonstrates there are two Proto-Algonquin forms. Reflects as meaning owl in some language and cannibal monster in others. And again, you look at an owl. I did a search on the owl, and this is what it says. The bird used in proverbs and figures of speech in reference to its nocturnal habits, but also in Middle English for ugliness, spiritual blindness, maliciousness. It was a name for Satan in early 15 C, which I'm not sure that time period. Then it goes on to say, this is interesting. The association with gravity and wisdom comes after all of this, after the revival of classical learning, which classical learning to me is false light. Hey, the owl is of wisdom and this and that and the other. Of course, we all know, the Bohemian Grove and all that, and the owl. We talked about the eyes of the owl and the stars and the rotations and everything in other videos. But yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. So all this negativity was first, and then came, gravity, wisdom, and everything else. And that's, the Greek rendition of it. Okay, so the languages and the tribes in the northern area pretty much surmise that owl and Wendigo are the same, as well as cannibal. There's much reading on this, and I have all the supporting documentation in the folder that you can look at your leisure. Now, the part of the title that in this series is I Will Be Like the Most High. This is obviously Satan's declaration of being like God. When I saw the owl connection, it hit me. I just knew. And I knew right where to go. First off, we have to understand this verse. And Adam called his wife Eve, and Eve because she was the mother of all living. And if we think about the wording of this, if Eve is the mother of all living, is there a mother of all death? If there's no difference, why not just say the mother of all? There is an opposite, and she's called Lilith. Now, before we start talking about Lilith, let me explain this. I don't know the whole Adam connection and first wife and all that. The Bible does not state that. Okay. Lilith is mentioned one time in Isaiah, and we're going to get to that. The whole, I guess not separate study, but whatever you would call the, tangent or whatever of her being connected to Adam before Eve. I have never been shown anything of that, never been led to pursue anything of that. But I don't know. Okay. That's between you and the Lord. If you've been shown something, great. You can share it in the comments, that's fine. In good taste, please. But yeah, I'm not going to go down that road, in other words. But there is an opposite, and I believe she's called Lilith. And I believe she's the mother of all death. And you're going to see that here in a minute. In Jeremiah 44, Jeremiah talks about the Queen of Heaven and how they've worshipped this Queen of Heaven. They bake cakes with her face on it, all this different stuff. And to me, they're giving worship to this creature, as you'll see. I believe the Wendigo is her fruit child. Remember, seed, then you have growth, and then you have production. So the seeds of sin and abominations are planted, they grow, and then they produce, and they become, they grow. produce. They're the product. They're the para, the fruit. But notice how the Wendigo is tied to north, famine, and winter. These are all references to judgment, and which I'll highlight here in the future. I just want you to kind of keep these in the back of your mind. All right. All right. Here we go. This is Isaiah 34. The wild beast of the desert shall also meet with the wild beast of the island. So let's talk about this. We'll read it through first. And the satyr shall cry to his fellow, and the screech owl shall rest there, and for herself find a place of rest. There the great owl will make her nest, and lay and hatch under her shadow, and there shall the vultures be gathered, every one with her mate. Okay, so the wild beasts. These are the monsters. These are the Nephilim, whatever you want to call them, the wild beasts. Obviously, I got to the point of where I was like concordancing everything, and I just couldn't keep up. So, take a look at the concordance of all this. The wild beast of the desert shall also meet with the wild beast of the island. I immediately thought of Plum Island. Immediately. And I think that this is where they're doing a lot, not necessarily just Plum Island. Indonesia is another place. Philippines is another. All these third world countries, they have these places set up on these islands. It's better security. It's more isolated. They can see somebody approach from miles away, versus, inside a city where, you can drive up on it or whatever. Rumors go around, whatever. But anyway, the wild beasts of the island. Now, let's talk about this island. To solidify my belief on that, it takes me back to where the wild things are. And Obama actually read this to a group of children. Wild beasts of the islands. And if you know anything about where the wild things are, it was a storybook about a boy who goes to an island where there's all kinds of beasts, and he is their king. Kind of like Obama will be. He goes under a mysterious transformation into a jungle environment, winds up sailing to an island inhabited by malicious beasts known as wild things. After successfully intimidating the creatures, Max is hailed as the king of the wild things and enjoys a playful romp with his subjects. They're all Nephilim. Claws, human feet, horns. So anyway, back to this. The satyr shall cry to his fellow. The satyr we've already discussed. This is Sasquatch. This goes back to the word hairy, as in Esau. Esau was a satyr, and there's the whole video series on that, so we're not going to go there. But now we have this screech owl shall rest there, and she shall find herself a place of rest, and screech owls nest and mate in the winter. And there the great owl will make her nest in the desolation, all right? Or during the desolation, however you want to see that. Lay, hatch, and gather under her shadow. And I think that's the shadow of death in Psalms 23. Because if you go to Psalms 23, the valley of the shadow of death means winter torrent in valley. So I believe this shadow of this owl is the shadow of death during a winter torrent. We have major winter coming this year, if you haven't heard. Anyway, so we talked about that. So anyway, let me see if there's anything else here I wanted to highlight. So there's two different groups here. I'm actually going to pause real quick and look at the coordinates and just see something. Apologize, I don't have my concordance down here to get it right now. Excuse me. Okay. So here's our owl. Here's our mother of these Wendigos. Okay. And here we have owl's feet. on this artwork, if you will, flanked by two owls. This is Lilith. Okay, let me stop that. All right, you may have thought, and I've wandered off path with the Wendigo into something else. What I'm showing you in the following picture is the title page of a very interesting article. Lilith is the reference to a screech owl and the great owl and the great horned owl. We all know that the Wendigos are also seen as horned. Now, she talks about how that was a mistake from a movie, and now we have all this culture. There have been ones that have been horned that are seen. Well, it's not a deal breaker in the study. It's just knowing that it could be a possibility. Great horned owls, great horned Wendigos. I don't know. But anyway, here's our definition right here of a screech owl that we talked about up here in Isaiah 34. Up here, screech owl and great owl, because we have two different words, two different concordants. One is directly right here, a night specter. That's exactly what that thing is. It's a night specter. Screech owl, Lilith, the name of the female goddess known as the night demon who haunts the desolation places of Edom. Nocturnal animal that inhabits desolate places. Desolate places are places that have faced judgment. Okay. Great owl. The unused word spring forward arrow snake as darting on its prey. Great owl. Poisonous snakes have arrow-shaped heads. This was kind of a confusing one to me. Okay. So great owl. First off, these things really move quickly and fast, and obviously are very cunning. I'm not sure if that's the reference here, but I know there's poison with the Wendigo, as far as the poisonous stance of self feeding, taking care of self first. God's going to rebuild a church, but it's going to be built like it was back in the day, where everyone's giving up their things to put into a collective for everybody and whoever needs it most. I mean, it's going to be a tough time. And is that a poison sense of getting into the person, that poison, to change them into the Wendigo? Or is it something totally different? Am I missing the mark on that? But anyway, that's what we have here. If you come up with anything, let me know. As I was researching owl in the Bible, aside from the distinct references that we just talked about above, I came across other concordance for owl and was stumped. In Deuteronomy, the owl concordance appears to be a reference to offspring, and two concordance words were used was H1323, which is branch or progeny, or build a family, and also H3284, which means daughters of the owl, which is pretty interesting. This is a direct reference to what we have learned in Isaiah, building a nest or a family is what she's doing. Again, as I was looking at the concordance trying to find some connection, I came across owl in a different sense, and that was a container or kettle or pot or furnace. I'm not sure exactly what this means, if it's part to do with setting up something for cannibalism, cooking, some sort of strange, pot, kettle. I talk a little bit about that in Satan's Garden video, so it might be a connection to that. I'm not sure. But I found this interesting because I came across this article, which basically says this. So this is from Amy Dahlstrom, University of Chicago, and she took these nursery rhymes, and this is what they translated in. As a nursery rhyme for a kid in the Indian culture, one of the sub-tribes, I'm not sure which. Whenever I didn't behave, my mother would always say, "Now I'm going to call an owl and pour water on you." She would say to me, "Stay." So I was afraid of owls. Their kettles are bristling with owl awls, which an awl is like a scratch. It's like a talon, I'm sure. A scratch awl is what you use to, make an extra hole in your belt or something like that. And they always go around with cold water, she would always tell me. So that's one nursery rhyme. And here's another one, kind of the same thing. And the owls always go around carrying big kettles on their backs. This makes no sense. So what are they trying to come across here? And the water is always cold. They would dip the children who are bad in the water. And they have sharp deer antlers for ear piercers, and they pierce your ears. Anyway, so if anyone's got an idea on that, so here we go. This is owl up here, owl, cup, and then if you go to 3599, or the flanking concordance, a cooking range, parallel stones on a boiler, ranges for pots. So what? I don't know the connection here. Is it something to set up to cook the flesh? These kids, they're going to eat the kids? I'm not sure. But anyway, I thought I felt obligated to include it since I found it. What's unusual about screech owls? One striking property is that some screech owls are red, others are gray. So when this sculpture was made, it was originally painted in this pigment, this red. Traces of red pigment still remain on the figure's body that was originally painted red overall. So, just another tie-in that this is Lilith here. And this is just a cutout here, pretty much. The identification of the reef as depicting Lilith has become the staple of popular writing on that subject. Raphael believes the relief to be only an extant depiction of a Sumerian female demon called Lilitu, and thus defined Lilitu's iconography. Citations regarding this assertions lead back to Henry Frankfurt. Frankfurt himself based his interpretation on the deity as a demon Lilith, and the presence of wings and birds' feet, and the representation of owls. He cites the Babylonian epic of Gilgamesh as his source, that such creatures are inhabitants of the land of the dead. And the creatures that dwell there are bird-like, wearing feather garments. Remember all the Mayans and the Incas and all the big feather dresses they all wear? Indians wear all kinds of feathers. Were they visited by these things? Quite possibly. So you have the incarnation of winter, the embodiment of hunger, which of course, with a harsh winter, you're going to have this, and then the personification of selfishness, which he's talked about. Right now, we are being put into a position because of fear of C has run rampant up I've already said it, so COVID has already ramped up the people of the government and now has seized this opportunity to manipulate control over the people. The timing is perfect. We're at wintertime. People during this time want to do more. They want to eat, they want to travel, purchase, celebrate, etc. With the virus, we're in our homes, and the seriousness of the COVID continues. As the seriousness of the COVID continues, more lockdown and vaccination measures will be implemented, like the boiling water of a frog. So as this all keeps going and going, the restrictions are going to get tighter and tighter and tighter. The winter atmosphere will provide the elite an additional medium to instill fear of starvation and force us to rely on the system instead of Jesus Christ. And that system will eventually be the mark. Eventually will be there. The winter scenario is seen easily in the film My Pet Goat 2. You got this goat in a winter FEMA camp. You got the lights, the barbed wire. Barbed wire is obviously to keep them in, you can tell. The winter scenario is outlined in God's word as well. And Job, Father says to Job, "Hast thou entered into the treasures of the snow, or have you seen the treasures of the hail, which I have reserved against the time of trouble?" And of course, that same phrase, "shall be a time of trouble," is when Michael shall stand up in a day such as never was since there's been a nation, even unto that time. At that time, thy people shall be delivered. That everyone that's found written in the book. In the heart of the Algonquin territory is the state of Minnesota. I find this somewhat ironic because I'm from northern Iowa in a town called Algona, which is Algonquin for Algonquin waters. In Minnesota, there's a lake called Cass Lake, which is named after the governor, And Cass Lake has an island inside of it called Star Island. This island contains another lake, and it's called Wendigo Lake. Yes, it is named after the creature. So Wendigo is located on Star Island in Cass Lake in the television series Ripley's. Okay, so yeah, what I was put this in here for is there's not many lakes that have an island with another lake on them. So that's what we have. So when you look at now, this is going to require a little bit of imagination on your part. A little bit, maybe thinking of like the Groks a little bit. I saw this right away. I didn't know how to guide you guys through it. So let's see what we can come up with. So this is Star Island, and this is Lake Wendigo, and obviously around all of this here is Cass Lake. Okay. I see. When I turn this upside down, when I put you're facing south here, okay, and we're gonna walk through this on Google Earth. I saw a face here, and what I want you to think about is this is a mouth, a nose. You have one eye here, which is obvious, and look at that perfect circle, you know? Over here, there's another circle, but it's very, very faint, okay? And this big blue body right here is like something that's hiding behind and it's peeking around the corner. So I'm going to pull it up, and hopefully you guys can see it, and see what y'all think. Okay, so here we go. Cass Lake. All right. There's a little tiny portage area right here. This is an island, Star Island. On that island is another lake right here. That's our Lake Wendigo. Okay. So as we look at this, we're looking at, here's north. So we're going to turn north to south. Just about right here. So if you're familiar with the Groks, then you understand kind of what I'm doing. What I'm wanting to tell you is this is some sort of, like, imagine this a door. Imagine a monster peeking around a corner on a door. And here we have a head, like an ear or a horn maybe. Same thing here. Comes down, jawline, or chin, cheek, eye up there, and then back around. So this is concealing the rest of him. Okay. So let's take a closer look. Now I'm going to turn these things off so we can look at this. Now you see how perfectly cut this is, right? That's obvious. If you look here, I'm actually going to go out a little bit. If you look here, you can have a very faint line, kind of the same thing here. It's almost like a color difference in the trees. It comes right through here. And then as you get up here, you have these sporadic fields that outline it even more. All right. And it's another eye. You have this darkening eye again. Okay. So again, it's a very faint line right through here. Very, very faint. All the way up through here and around. Okay. This is one of those noses. A picture of a skeleton nose that's almost non-existent. You get just a kind of craggly nose. Of course, you have his eye. And these down here are the teeth. Like he's been chewing on gravel. Alright. Real nasty teeth. Now, I hope you see it. What I'm going to do is just I did a really quick, I'm not good with drawings, and I wasn't like going to buy a program to do it, but I was like, well, hopefully this will help. This is kind of what I'm seeing. So mouth, eye, and he's peeking around this corner. All right. Anyway, guys, play around with Google Earth if you don't see it, and maybe the Lord will show it to you. I saw it originally without him peeking. I was like, Lord, I'm missing something here. What? I think you're trying to show something, but I'm missing something. And he's like, yeah, he's peeking around the corner. So, anyway, if you see anything else, let me know. All right, guys. God bless you all. Take care and be safe. He's coming soon.